Seville is one of those cities where almost every stone seems to belong to more than one world at once. It is easy to reduce it to orange trees, flamenco, and postcard views of the Giralda, but the real history is much bigger than that. Seville began as an Iberian settlement and flourished under Rome as Hispalis, becoming an administrative center of the province of Baetica on the Guadalquivir. Even in antiquity, its power came from geography. It was inland but still connected to the sea, which made it a natural crossroads for trade, authority, and ambition. After Rome weakened, the city passed through Vandal and then Visigothic rule, which meant Seville entered the early medieval world already carrying layers of political memory. The next great transformation came in 711 when Muslim forces took the city. Under Islamic rule, Seville became Ishbiliya, and it grew into one of the major urban centers of al-Andalus. After the collapse of the Caliphate of Córdoba in the early 11th century, Seville became the center of its own Taifa kingdom, and later it was ruled by the Almoravids and the Almohads. This was not a minor chapter in the city's story. It was one of the periods that shaped Seville most deeply. The urban fabric, the palace traditions, and the monumental style that still defines the city today all owe an enormous debt to this era. The Giralda began life as the minaret of the city's great mosque, and the Alcazar grew from earlier Islamic palace fortress traditions. Then came another decisive break. In 1448, Ferdinand III of Castile captured Seville, bringing the city into Christian hands during the Reconquista. But Christian conquest did not produce a clean cultural reset. Instead, Seville became one of the clearest examples in Europe of a city built through layering rather than erasure. The former mosque site evolved into the cathedral complex, the Giralda was preserved and later crowned with a Renaissance belfry, and the Alcazar continued to develop under Christian rulers while retaining strong Islamic and Mudejar character. That is one reason Seville feels so visually distinctive now. Its skyline is not the product of a single civilization, but of several, stacked on top of one another. So the early history of Seville is not just a sequence of rulers, it is the story of a city repeatedly redefined by empire, religion, and strategic value. Roman Hispalis, Islamic Ishbiliya, and Christian Sevilla were not separate places occupying the same map point. They were stages of one long reinvention. By the late Middle Ages, Seville was already more than a regional city. It was becoming a symbol of how Iberian history itself had been forged through conquest, coexistence, adaptation, and memory.
If the first act of Seville's history was about cultural layering, the second was about explosive global importance. After Columbus's voyages, Seville entered the age that would make it one of the most important cities in the Spanish world. In 1503, the Casa de Contratación was established in Seville to regulate trade and movement between Spain and the Americas. That decision transformed the city. Its river port became the great inland gateway of empire, the place through which ships, people, silver, goods, paperwork, and imperial ambition flowed. For roughly 2 centuries, Seville held a dominant position in Spain's New World commerce, and by the 16th century it had become one of the richest and most populous cities in Spain. This wealth changed the city's rhythm and its appearance. Merchants, officials, sailors, clergy, and migrants all passed through Seville. Churches, palaces, and institutions expanded. The city's artistic life flourished, and its prestige helped shape the wider Spanish Golden Age. Seville's university was founded in 1502, and the city later became associated with artists such as Velázquez and Murillo, figures whose careers were tied to the cultural energy of the city's wider world. This was Seville at its most outward-facing, a city connected not just to Andalusia or Castile, but to the Atlantic system that Spain was building overseas. But Seville's greatness was never guaranteed. The same river that made the city powerful also imposed limits. Over time, difficulties navigating the Guadalquivir weakened Seville's maritime advantage, and trade increasingly shifted toward Cádiz. That decline was reinforced when the Casa de Contratación was moved to Cádiz in 1717. Seville did not disappear, but the era in which it stood at the uncontested center of Spain's Atlantic world was over. The city remained rich in churches, archives, and memory, yet it had to live with the contrast between its monumental past and a more constrained economic reality. And yet, even in relative decline, Seville kept hold of something powerful: symbolic weight. The cathedral, Alcázar, and Archivo de Indias together preserve the city's three great identities: Islamic inheritance, Christian monarchy, and Atlantic empire. That is why Seville's history feels unusually concentrated. In a small area of the city, you can read the story of medieval al-Andalus, the Reconquista, and Spain's imperial expansion, almost building by building. Seville is not only a place where history happened, it is a place where history remained visible.
In the modern era, Seville became a city of reinvention rather than domination. The 19th century was not easy. Development was interrupted by invasion, revolution, and civil conflict, but Seville retained its regional importance and its cultural magnetism. The April Fair, founded in 1847, became one of the city's defining traditions, and by the early 20th century, Seville was ready to present itself again on a world stage. The Ibero-American Exposition of 1929 marked a major turning point in that effort, helping trigger a new urban and cultural renaissance. That process continued in 1992 when Seville hosted Expo 92. Its theme, the Age of Discovery, deliberately linked the modern city to the 1492 world that had once made it globally significant. The fair brought enormous international attention, major infrastructure, and a fresh round of urban transformation. In that sense, modern Seville did something clever. Instead of pretending its imperial and multicultural past had vanished, it turned that past into part of its modern identity. The city learned to live not only from memory, but through memory. That is why Seville still feels larger than itself. It is a Roman city, an Andalusi city, a Christian royal city, an imperial port, and a modern cultural capital all at once. Its monuments are not random attractions. The Giralda speaks to Almohad Seville. The cathedral speaks to Christian triumph and ambition. The Alcázar speaks to continuity through adaptation. The Archivo de Indias speaks to the global machinery of empire. Few cities reveal so clearly how power changes hands, while architecture, ritual, and memory keep negotiating with one another. In the end, the history of Seville matters because it is not a narrow local story. It is a city-scale version of Mediterranean, Islamic, Spanish, and Atlantic history combined. It shows how geography can create opportunity, how conquest can reshape identity without fully erasing what came before, and how a city can outlive the empires that once made it central. Seville survives in the imagination because it feels cinematic, but also because it reveals something real. History is not built in straight lines. It is built in layers, and Seville may be one of the clearest examples of that anywhere in Europe.